Thank you for joining us for SB 101 Operations. My name is Bryn Gibbs. I'm the founder and CEO of Consumer Fusion. I'm sure you all recognize these four handsome gentlemen to my right, but I will let them intro themselves. Marty, since you're on your phone, we'll start with Ben. I'm just kidding.
To start.
Hello, hello. Hi, I'm Marty Farrell from Philly Pretzel Factory. We're local here in Philadelphia, so for you who are not from Philadelphia, welcome to the city of brotherly love. We have about 170 stores open right now, and just look forward to sharing anything I can with you guys about operations, leadership, or any of those types of things. So we just want to echo one thing. Please ask questions. I think that's the best thing. Maybe you're sitting out there right now with something that's kind of bugging you a little bit, operations, who do I hire, how do I get infrastructure set up, anything you can think of kind of that's nudging you right now so you can walk away from today with an actionable item that's kind of bugging you right now. So please just ask that to any of us, and we'll do our best to answer that question. So thank you all, and welcome.
Good morning, Jesse Kaiser here from St. Louis, Missouri. I'm a franchisee, multiple brands, multiple locations, multiple states. In my past life, I was a franchisee owner of Little Caesars Pizza and Valpak Franchising. And currently, Sport Clip Haircuts in 5 states, OxyFresh Carpet Cleaning in the St. Louis DMA, and our new venture is Ideal Image. It's not quite a franchise, it's some hybrid because of all the medical laws. It's really hard to franchise it. So we're in 2 states with that, be in 4 by the end of this year.
Very good. They gave us all these microphones, so I don't know what we're going to do. My name is Jeremy Morgan. I'm the CEO for WellBiz Brands. We're the franchisor for 5 beauty and wellness concepts, Dry Bar, Amazing Lash Studio, Elements Massage, Radiant Waxing, and Fitness Together. So we have about 900 locations in total across the brands, and looking forward to chat about operations with all of you today.
All right. Is this one on? Perfect. Ben Crosby. I'm currently the CEO, and I was the founder of Drip Bar Franchising. The Drip Bar is IV supplementation. Currently, we've been opening locations for the past 18 months. We have 33 sites open. We'll have 51 by the end of the year. So we're growing and scaling in the medical franchise world quite quickly. I'm an entrepreneur. That's my DNA. Built a lot of companies, but Drip Bar has taken on a life of its own and learning along the way. So, but entrepreneur, not really big in operations, but I have to be.
So Penny was supposed to be with us today, but she is down in Florida. Unfortunately, she and Amy had to cancel last minute because of the storm. So Ben is filling in last minute. We appreciate it. And real quick, Ben, you got to show everyone the inside of your jacket. Stand on up. I don't know if you in the back can see this, but he's branded. #DripBar. But to mirror what Marty said, we want this to be as engaging as possible. When we all had our first phone call to discuss what content we wanted to bring you today, we were all in agreement that hearing your pain points, you guys bringing up, what topics are important to you, that's going to be the most value for you. So please don't be shy. I'll walk around with a mic, and you guys can ask these guys any questions that you might have. But what we're going to start with is hiring. With the employee hiring crisis, we're all feeling that pain right now. So Marty, we'll start with you. Any new technology that you guys are using for that?
Sure. Well, first, also, I guess we don't have a bunch of Family Feud fans in the room, so I appreciate you all coming into this room. I heard we were competing with Family Feud. I got a little nervous, so thank you all. So just back to hirings piece. Obviously, there's lots of challenges in the marketplace right now, particularly in our field. And again, we would be considered quick service restaurants, food business. One thing is you got to pay more. That's the number one thing that definitely we've learned over the last 2 years. In terms of recruiting and getting good employees, we've done a lot of different things in terms of simplifying the process for people to apply to the job before they had to fill out a long form application. If they went to our website, we really just asked them 3 simple questions just to try to get a lead now. We look at that person as a lead, and how quickly can we get back to that person that we're hiring, whether it's in the store, at a storefront. Again, we're a store business, or an employee that's going to work in one of the franchise locations, or even at the corporate level for employees that we may be hiring to be part of the franchise team. So simple things like putting QR codes in stores that people can directly go right to this piece I'm talking about, answer 3 simple questions. We've used signage in the stores, which is something we've never done in the past, where we literally sent a kit to all of our franchisees, just like we were promoting a new pretzel flavor or something like that. Now hiring, join our team, those types of messages all over over to stores as well. So we really try to make sure people knew we were hiring. And we really just focused on the franchisees. You know, we do a lot of marketing to get customers in our stores. Well, we got to market to get employees in our stores. You got to kind of have that same mindset to get the good ones. And then obviously got to train and recruit them and all those things. So those are some of the things that we've done recently to, you know, get employees to come into the stores.
Jesse, how about you?
Jesse and I tested negative for COVID since we're sharing the microphone here, I guess.
So our first franchise concept was Little Caesars fast food. And I can remember back in 2005 when we first opened, it was almost annoying how many people would come in wanting an application, fill out, try to get work, right? I think we all experienced that back then. When I got into the salon business, particularly sport clips, we really only cut men's hair, right? That's not what most cosmetologists go to school for. They want to be platform performers and do color and do all the pretty floofy stuff. So from day one, I had to go get these people, and they're licensed. So they have to spend $20,000 in a year of their life getting accredited before they can come work for me legally. So it's a very small pool of people that I had to hire from. So I can remember like in 2010, I was even on MySpace just reaching out, saying, hey, if you know a cosmetologist, have them give me a call. I'd love to interview them. So we're staffed really well. In fact, we have more employees now than we ever had. And it's because I've always had to reach out to people and say, do you want to come work for us? So I think we're spending more money, placing more ads, having QR codes, making it easier for those that want to come apply for us. But if we actually started focusing on reaching out and trying to find the very best candidates. Now, I must be honest with you, we had to do that with the restaurant business and our carpet cleaning business. Partly, you know, my partner and I, we've got high expectations who we work with. And so we noticed that if we want to work with really great people, we've got to go get them. They're not going to come to us. Now, we do get them now from the referral business. Like, so QT is a well-known gas station. It's always like ranked number one in customer service. We get new employees from them, and they have a really high stretch. I mean, you have to do a math test. You have to pass a math test. That's pretty tough. I don't think I could pass it. And but we're getting people come in and say, I want to come work for you guys because your employees come in because we have to buy gas all the time for the vans. Your employees come in all the time and they seem really happy. And I want to work somewhere that I'm happy working. So think about that too, is your current employees are your best ambassadors to get the new guys and girls.
Wait, sorry, real quick. Do you mind sharing which platforms you favor?
Well, not MySpace anymore.
Thank God for that.
So what I'm using, my strategy is this. I use Indeed resume alerts, and I will contact them on Indeed, but I will go find them on social media, and I will reach out to them, and I get a much higher hit reaching out to them on social media. No one's getting inboxing, hey, I saw your resume, I'd love to talk to you. It just doesn't happen, so you stand out right away. I am getting into LinkedIn as I look for a little bit higher caliber people for my medical spas and looking for management level people. LinkedIn's doing really well for me on that. I'm still finding them on LinkedIn. I'm still going to social media and finding them because I've got LinkedIn. I don't check it very often. I keep it updated, but I don't check it very often. I'm on Facebook every day.
First of all, if anyone's looking for Jesse's MySpace account still, we can see what song you had in the background and everything.
His top 8.
So as a franchisor, we approach the recruiting piece in 4 ways. What's the technology? We invested actually, fortunately, just before the pandemic on kind of a platform-wide applicant tracking system. It's not a full HRIS. That's for franchisees to manage their team with, but it gave us as the franchisor visibility into the people pipeline at every single studio so that we could have a sense of which franchise owners were advancing candidates, how quickly people were responding, and then being able to coach them if there was a gap relative to what was needed. Within iSIMS, which is the platform we use, you're able to easily advertise through Indeed, which seems to be kind of the preferred place for cosmetologists, estheticians, folks in our category. Second is on the marketing side. We redirected up to a third, even a half in some of our brand funds towards people recruiting from consumer advertising. That is probably going to be pivoting back, knowing where we're at in the recessionary environment we're heading into. But the people in the studios are the product, and ultimately we're turning people away right now. So we quickly realized that if we've got empty slots, empty chairs, empty rooms because we don't have service providers, then we're turning away money, and we should redirect those funds. So we developed a new recruiting program on the advertising side. Third, really just gets to working with the franchisees in two ways, and that's on culture and then on the recruiting tactics specifically. So as Jesse mentioned, if you're not a great place to work, word's going to get out really, really quick, particularly in the personal services industry. So that's just kind of the ante to the table. But the recruiting tactics, and we had a lot of franchise owners that were used to the Little Caesars situation where it was like, hey, we're Dry Bar, and like people just come in and want to work here. This is easy. And that's just not the case anymore. So we spent a lot of time on nuts and bolts tactics on how do you respond back to a resume within text within an hour? How do you schedule that interview within a day? How do you show up to that interview with an offer letter ready to go if you like them? You're not able to take the week or two. By the time you've done that, they've gone and applied 3 or 4 places and you've already lost them. So real simple stuff in the scheme of things, but added together, I think that there was just some of the best practices had kind of got out of habit within our system for some of our franchise owners because they didn't need it, and they were known as a great employer, and if you'd build it, they would come, and you just have to be more on your toes these days.
Sorry, Ben, real quick. There's a hand up in the back. I'm going to walk with the mic just so we can hear you.
So you mentioned, finding resumes on Instagram. We own Millie's Homemade Ice Cream. So just in Pennsylvania right now, 5 locations, or 5 franchises, locations, 7 corporate stores. We are, like everybody else, is having an issue hiring. We have a pretty robust Instagram. And you mentioned finding a resume that you like and direct messaging someone on Instagram, something like that. How are you finding that? Are you seeing people that are interacting with your social media and then reaching out to them, or what are you seeing to identify somebody as someone you want to approach?
So with the gray in my beard, I'm going to use Facebook terms and not Instagram terms. So best way to do that is I have a separate Facebook account and an Instagram account, and 100% of my friends are friends in my particular industry or areas, okay? So the referral, like Facebook is always telling me a new stylist that's in the area because of common interest and mutual friends, things like that. It's also pretty easy, the Facebook search algorithm is pretty complicated and allows you to get granular if you really just take the time to learn it, right? And then half the time it's a crapshoot, so you just make your message be very inviting and say, if I haven't got the right person, please let me know. And then I get so little pushback from it. Every once in a while I get someone like, please don't do that, whatever. And the oddest thing is I'll reach out to someone who has a resume on Indeed. They don't respond. 18 months later, they inbox me, hey, are you still hiring? Right? So this is a get staff slow scheme, all right? But it works, and I would employ it to just start reaching out and finding candidates. I mean, when you look at their social media, you know right away if they're probably someone you want in your store or not. So I love it as that. It filters out. I mean, if they're throwing up gang signs and talking about 420 or hating their baby mama, I'm not asking them to come work for me.
Sorry,
Sure.
we have one more question over here in the corner.
Yeah, thanks. So I don't work in your industry. I'm in economic development. And so I approach this from a completely different lens. Are you guys or anybody in the room accessing the workforce boards in your community to find talent? Well, I'd encourage all of you to do that. Those are the groups that are usually financed through the state workforce commissions that have lists of folks that are looking to be upskilled, maybe they're unemployed right now. And so I would encourage you, especially for those lower level positions, to get into that and make good friends with your workforce boards, because that's certainly a talent pipeline for you. And then the second thing I would say is get into your local school districts and create a talent pipeline for yourself. You talk about stylists and things like that. Right now we're doing, I'm in Texas, and so we're doing a whole program and campaign around getting industry, whether that's industrial, whether it's retail, whether it's technology, getting industry involved in the classroom, getting them involved in the CTE programs to create a talent pipeline for themselves into the future. Not just for them, but for the industry. So back to your thoughts.
Hey,
Thanks, Chris.
the other thing too, I would add to that, when you're reaching out and looking for ideal candidates, a lot of times my resume alerts will be for an industry that is complementary to my industry, meaning that employee can make an easy transition over to this one. So obviously with salons, that's not possible, but with the carpet cleaning and the food, we were able to find, maybe they didn't work in food, or maybe they didn't work as a carpet cleaner. In fact, we almost don't like it if they worked at a carpet cleaner and they got bad habits, right? But if they worked at Molly Maid or something like that, that is a person that we'll reach out to, because Molly Maid has a little structure in their franchise, right? And they're used to going to people's homes, so they probably passed a background check. So there's other ways to peel this onion besides looking for people that are directly already working in the industry you're trying to hire for. Find out complementary industries that are easy transitions for them. Sometimes people just lose their passion for that particular industry, but still want to keep doing things like interacting with the client, going to clients' homes, and so on.
Okay, for Wellbrers, I don't know if I heard it right or not, but you mentioned, are you using national marketing dollars from your franchisees to help them find staff? Is that what you said?
Right. Yeah, that's right. We fortunately had set up our ad funds in a way that gave a lot of flexibility. We did talk to our advisory councils about, everyone was like, fantastic, like, let's do it. There was not a lot of pushback, but we redirected both a good chunk of the national ad fund media budgets, and then we also administer an awful lot of the local spend for folks through our digital program, and we set up kind of a different track for recruiting on the digital local spend, and let the local spend requirement be achieved through recruiting dollars as well.
So if a potential franchisee says, hey, you help me staff this space?
Yeah, fundamentally it was the same type of, same type of digital advertising that we use to go fill with consumers. It was like, let's go advertise to therapists, to cosmetologists, to estheticians, fill a funnel, and kind of work the lead flow that way. Yep.
All right. Anything you want to add to this?
So I'm in a unique industry, and I've always built brands that have been based on culture and lifestyle. And with Drip Bar, there's the national shortage of nurses, but we don't have any delay. Nurses are looking for this new lifestyle, this new change. When I was building Tap Out Fitness, it was the same. A strong brand, a strong lifestyle. It had people that really recognized the brand power, and they wanted to be part of it. So, we are just on Indeed. We have a very structured hiring process, but it's all down to, a nurse being able to do a really good IV. That's a key differentiator of this entire business.
Thank you. One thing that Jesse touched on was happy employees are your best PR. So unless anyone has any other questions, let's shift to your culture. What do you all do to contribute and evaluate your brand's culture?
Great question, and I guess it really depends on what we're talking about at the store level, at the corporate level, from a consumer standpoint, right? So, I just kind of focus a little bit on the operation side here and sort of the franchisor-franchisee relationship culture-wise and how we sort of measure those things. And somebody mentioned them earlier, Franchise Business Review. I'm sure they're probably in the room, somebody from that company.
Courtney, there you are.
She's in the back there. And you can use a Franchise Business Review. You can use, again, if you're really small, you can do some of these outreach programs yourself, but really kind of checking in with the franchisee. Franchise Business Review does a great job to see how you're doing. They measure, you against your marketing, against your leadership, against your operations. We're asking the franchisee to give us this feedback. So it becomes more, you're listening, you want to hear from the franchisees, and then obviously you got to take action on the things that they recommend and say that you need to change. But I think the culture becomes more inclusive and the franchisees feel like you're listening to them, which, Don talked about. And I think Don did a great job this morning, obviously, that talking about what type of culture you want to set within your franchise system. So somebody like Franchise Business Review, or just doing it yourself, reaching out to franchisees, communicating with franchisees, that will really tell you what type of culture you have. And obviously the core values and mission statement, things like Don mentioned earlier, if you don't have those things implemented in your system, you should really go back and sit and think about, what are those? And if you have them, and I was taking notes during Don's thing also, is do we really have the right ones? Do we need to evaluate those? Do we need to make any changes to those as well to really make sure it impacts culture? So
we all know, finding the right franchisee. What do you do if you have a franchisee who is not meeting your culture or your brand standards? Jeremy, you want to take this one?
Sure. I was going to wait to see if Jesse had something to say on as a franchisee. Well, first of all, if that is what is going on, it's hopefully been a long series of conversations over time. I think you definitely, I always tell our team the franchise agreements are the equivalent of a prenup. Like if you're getting that out and reviewing that in your marriage, it's probably not a good situation. And so certainly a franchisor has all these legal rights, but if you're noticing that there's a brand standard issue, it needs to be a series of discussions over time, which ultimately layers up to how do you exit somebody if they're not going to really engage in the way that you need to on behalf of the brand. We do have a resales team that we use for folks that are looking to monetize their investment ultimately. So fortunately, we have a tool in place to easily transition owners if they aren't meeting kind of the right expectations along the way. But we lead with the idea that we're going to get them to where they need to be. Usually there's some underlying reason, probably about profitability. If someone's vacillating on why they aren't wanting to do things a specific brand way and they're struggling to figure out how to make it work. And part of our job as the franchisor is ultimately to meet them where they're at there and work with them to get the financial goals they need, and then probably they'll be following the system the way they need. Usually the very things that they're struggling against, not following the system, is what's causing part of the problem on not having the financial goals that they're needing. And so bridging that gap and helping them understand and see kind of what's missing and why that's causing the issue is a big part of it.
Shift to communications. So, Ben, what do you guys do? What technology do you provide your franchisees in regards to communication? Or what is in your pipeline for future tech for communication?
To communicate with the franchisees, it's the phone. Pick up, talk to them, and it all starts when you're first selling, right? We have a lot of emerging franchisors in here. And a lot of times that's the hardest thing because you're bringing on a new franchisee. You have to go through the whole prospect. You have to go through the whole conversations because it's not just a sale. It's not a short-term sale. If you're looking at it to be a short-term sale, you're not going to be a good franchisor. You're developing a long-term partnership, and you need to have the door open where franchisees are comfortable calling anybody in the organization at any time within reason to really set that culture, set that focus. I mean, we have other tools. We use Fran Connect. We do Consumer Fusion. We have all the online stuff, everything that's needed. But at the end of the day, the best form of communication is picking up the phone and talking to people. And if you're not ready to do that, it's going to be a dramatic culture shift. Then it turns into the leader of the company just being able to sit and be the what do you call them? The keyboard warriors. You can always be tough when you're not putting a face to it and not being in front of the people. And, when you're building a company, it's not always good. You'll go through bumps, and being able to pick up the phone and talk to people helps all the time.
And Jeremy, how about you?
Well, so first of all, I totally concur. I feel like with particularly our younger employees, a lot of times it's like you have this phone, it's in front of you all the time. You use the numbers to call people, but we do have a really systematic approach on many layers of how we communicate out to the system. Part of that's just the nature of being a somewhat larger chain, but it's really rigorous on, every week we have our newsletter, every month we have our webinar, every quarter they can expect a one-on-one coaching session with their business coach. Every year we have our annual conference. They're going to have a message from me in a certain way. And so you have all those things. We have a ticket system where any question that they have kind of gets to the right department, so it's not being filtered through the business coach every single time. If it's just a marketing question or a technology question or something else, we try to more or less, we have Facebook groups, we have our chat groups along the way. It's always amazing to me as someone who spends their day thinking about, okay, we have this initiative, this is what we're getting everyone to do, we've communicated it through these 12 channels, and then when you go and talk to a franchisee, they'll be like, yeah, what was that thing again? You're like, oh my gosh, it's in all this stuff, right? So you can't repeat it enough, you can't over-communicate enough, you can't have enough channels to reach them on because, look, they're in the firefight all day of being in those retail locations, and they're busy serving the guests. They're not always attuned to every little thing that the franchisor has on their mind.
Obviously concur a lot with what they said. The number one for me is face-to-face meetings really with franchisees. I think from a communication standpoint, I sometimes think we forget that in our world, again, we're retail, so we have to get out and be in the stores. So we're really making sure we're trying to make a robust effort to be at every one of our stores as often as possible. A minimum, you're going to see a franchise business coach in the store at least once a month in our system. You're going to have talked to that person multiple times throughout the month. So, really just trying to be face-to-face facing with the franchisees. And then just to kind of add on to what they were saying over there also, one of the things that we implemented during the pandemic, and we needed to really make sure we were communicating with franchisees, we really just set up a Zoom call. We were doing it weekly with our entire franchise system and giving updates on everything. You would hear from our director of marketing, you would hear from our vice president of training, you would hear from myself, you would hear from supply chain, and we've continued that. And I think that really has helped also because we're just constantly in front of franchisees. We set it up for 45 minutes. It's on a Wednesday, 10:30 in the morning. You got to commit 45 minutes. We record it if you can't join us because sometimes you're not going to be able to be there. And then we make sure we post that onto our intranet. We call it the Pretzel Hub, where franchisees can go back and watch it and review it at any time also, so they can kind of keep up with what's going on in the system.
So with these monthly meetings, are you going over KPIs every month with them? And if so, how do you track that?
With franchisees, you mean? Yeah, sure, of course. So that's the visits, the field visits the franchise business coach would do. Obviously, KPIs are important, but I think each meeting is going to be a little bit different, quite honestly. It depends on what the franchisee's needs are. What is the common agenda that we've created to go into that visit with that franchisee? So it may be KPIs, it may be cost of goods, it may be payroll, it may be some of these things that some other franchisees are struggling with, but it could be other communication things we need to work with on that franchisee. Brand alignment, product quality, more local store marketing. So each time it's going to change with the visits, specifically around the KPIs, the key performance indicators that we measure for franchisees. We send out what we call a scorecard to the franchisees, and it's all the data that we roll up from the franchisees. We have 15 data points that we've identified that the franchisee sees how they're doing, and they see how they're performing against the franchise system. So one example would be sales, right? Like week sales, how are you doing? Are you up or down? Here's where your number is. You're up 10%. The system average is up 18%, whatever that might be. Transactions, specific categories that we measure in terms of the products that we sell, how many people you've gotten on your social media, et cetera, et cetera. So we're constantly looking at those data points with the franchisees as well.
And how often do you send them that data?
They get it quarterly right now because it's a lot of data for us to roll up, to be honest with you. We want to try to get it out to them on a monthly basis. A lot of this stuff you can get a little bit easier, but when we're rolling it into the scorecard, it really becomes a quarterly piece that we're sending out.
How about any?
I don't need to wait. I'm good. So when you guys are doing your FBC visits, stuff. Have you guys shifted from more going from that cop to coach mode? And then as you're reviewing your KPIs and your analytics or franchisee scorecard, do you guys do any business planning with your franchisees to help them either improve where they're falling, or even just excel? Like, let's say they're number one, but they still want to improve even further. Like, where do you take it next after that?
Sure, I'll take a first stab at that. So yeah, so I mean, the KPIs on that quarterly review is definitely what the meetings are going to be based on for each quarter. And, you know, we all identify with the franchisee where they think they need help. Right, so again, if we can get the franchisee saying, here's where I really need help. I need help with social media marketing. I need help with, you know, one of the other KPIs. In our case, selling more party trays, pretzel party trays. Well, let's identify what we're going to do, and that will be the 3 to 5 things that we're going to really focus on with that franchisee and see if we can make a difference in the next 90 days when the report card comes or scorecard comes back out to look at that information. So we are using it consistently throughout the year to help the franchisees. I feel like there was another question in there, but I'm not sure if I got it.
I have a follow-up question to that.
Sure.
You guys say really focus on what they determine. Like, what does that focus look like? What do you guys do to help them in the next 90 days from when they've determined what they want to do to where they want to go?
Okay, good question. So I'll just use a specific example to try to help. So I'll just go back to that pretzel party tray piece. So their system average is 25%, and this store is running 20%. We'll ask them why. Why do you think your store is down? Why do you think you're not as good as the rest of the system? What are some of the things you've tried, right? Ask lots of questions like that first with the franchisee, and then we'll come up with what do you think we should be doing with the franchisee? What do you think we should be doing differently right now in the next 90 days? And hopefully they have some suggestions, and those are usually the best ones to implement, and some of the stuff that you were going to tell them to do anyway, but they now have the idea, have given you the idea, and then if it's stuff that we need to go back and do, for example, create a new marketing materials or POP or something like that for the stores, that will be our takeaway that we got to make sure we get back to the franchisee so that they can, you know, really use that information to grow in the future.
And do you have a dedicated person who helps people excel?
Excel?
Or just put that plan in place? Is there someone that's dedicated to helping them for all your systems?
Yeah, well, the FBC would be the person who would help the group of franchisees. In our case, each franchise business coach has somewhere around 25 to 30 stores that they work with. But then everybody in the corporate office, is what I always say, really works for them, myself included, because the FBCs are out there working with the franchisees. So if they need help with training, they have to come back and get the training department involved. If they need help with marketing, they got to get the marketing department involved. If they need, et cetera, et cetera.
Just a couple quick things that I think one of the things that we do that's maybe just a slightly different flavor on that, we have worked with our franchisees and our advisory councils to identify like really what are the 2 or 3 areas that as the franchisor we can make the biggest difference. And so in our system, that's membership sales, that's digital marketing with leads, and that's with people recruiting. And you know, rather than having necessarily an army of generalist business coaches that know a lot about a little, we have gone really deep in those areas. So as an example, we're probably not going to be terribly helpful on something like labor scheduling. We're not going to be terribly helpful on something like how do you manage cost of goods. Now, luckily, I'm in personal services, so cost of goods is like pretty small in the scheme of things, right? But I think identifying like what is the core expertise of the franchisor is going to be, setting that expectation starting with the prospecting process. If someone, isn't going to be able to do the things that as the franchisor, you're not going to be helping them focus on, like you might have a mismatch on your type of candidate. But if we have someone that more or less knows how to run a retail operation, we can supercharge things if we're focused on membership sales, on people recruiting, on digital marketing. And we're always, talking about how do we go about, like what's the next thing? Do we want to go deeper on that area? We run, we call them franchise performance groups, but we have weekly kind of online, almost like CEU type of classes where it's small groups of franchisees where we're going really, really deep on one of those topics. We have found that to be more useful than showing up at the franchise shop and saying, tell me what you want to talk about, what do you think is the problem, let's try to, it's like, nope, these are probably the three things you're going to get from us. For sure, that's met with resistance sometimes, but ultimately, in the world, I'm a big believer in our chain that the best thing that we can do is help them grow top line, and the rest of the unit level economic model works really, really well, and those are the three things we can do to work with them on it.
So question for the multi-unit owner. So obviously, do you run your own operations team yourself to evaluate your stores? Obviously, the franchisor sends out the NPC team once a month, they do their own KPIs, but do you have your own separate, or do you just follow what they're putting out?
I've got area managers that basically are mini owners that are responsible for repairs, training, staffing, anything in the community. So, is your question more like, do I have a different set of standards that I check them up on? Yeah, so this kind of goes back to that culture question that was a little bit earlier that I didn't get to answer. So, how our culture is performance based, right? And we inspire people. We don't motivate them. Motivation means I got to poke and prod you every couple of weeks to get you really excited, right? So we just have a culture where we're going to be better than the other guys. And as franchisors, you just pick another brand or an industry standard, and you just go up that. So, in Sport Clips, we have a thing called a success check where they come in once a quarter and rate how you perform to the ideal success check. 85% is passing, and you're all good, right? Our standard in Team Kaiser is 95. So the coach for the franchisor is like, great job, you did 93. My manager knows, oh shit, right? So what I always try to do and what I've always done is just said, where are the baselines for you guys? Like, what is the ideal? And then I need to figure out how to do a little bit better than that. And that draws the right type of people to come in. I mean, salons got hit really hard from being the shutdown and people afraid of the pandemic. We came back with 110% staffing. So while we were shut down for 5-6 weeks, I had my managers out recruiting. And it was that type of attitude of, we're going to be better than everyone. We will show up for work. We want to be here. So that's that culture question. And going back to the standards, we just take the franchise brand standards and just try to amplify them. So like with OxyFresh, our carpet cleaning company, we're trying to get our team members bigger, fatter tips because it has a huge impact. So we started really pushing tips. Surprisingly enough, people tip for carpet cleaning. We talk about total average ticket and add-ons because they're commission-based. So we always say, this is where the brand is, this is where we want to be.
So maybe talk about WSA in the top 25 that was created, because that's kind of a unique thing to us.
Yeah, so we've got a couple reports like in Sport Clips that I honestly, in full disclosure, I don't look at the net sales every week. I know the business well enough that there's these two reports of rankings that if that ranking is a high number, I made a lot of money that week. And so we have the entire team focused on trying to get on one of these two lists for these two reports. It's all performance-based.
So there's been a lot of topics and discussions, not only here, but just kind of nationally in terms of, recruiting and finding, staff to help the stores stay open and grow. I'm curious to your thoughts and types of attributes we look for at the brand level. For example, the franchise business coaches, what techniques are you using to find those guys? What kind of attributes do you look for in those team members? How do they contribute to the overall model?
So you mean just like recruiting for the franchisor team? Yeah, I think that in general, I think as the franchisor, for sure it's a tighter labor market, but I think the ability to go get kind of white collar, higher level staff is certainly easier than at studio level. I think that a big part of our, it gets back to core values. We talk a lot about growth. We've grown really fast. We've done a lot of acquisitions over time. I would say most folks on our team, you have to be both flexible and excited by that. And if it's not, you're not going to last on my team very long. And so we really screen people through that process. But a lot of it is really, really similar. I think that, as we've built kind of our bench of talent over time, it's a bit of a coaching tree. Like if we bring a real estate person in from Domino's, 6 months later, you can probably expect we'll have 2 or 3 more people from Domino's working from us. If we bring someone in from what company Y, right? Like we will find that reputation, and that referral-based approach is really the best way to go. We certainly employ recruiters and everything else to help, but the first pitch is like, hey, we're really open about here's the jobs we have open. Who do you know? Invite them in, and we've always found that's usually the best source of candidates.
Just add quickly to that. So one of our, the FBC position specifically you asked about, so our senior franchise business coach is actually an ex-franchisee. He sold his business and he's worked for us with us for the last 7 or 8 years. Our most junior FBC came from our training department. So he worked within our training department, and now we're sort of putting him into a FBC training program, and he will be elevated into a full-time, we'll give him a small group of stores to work with, actually in the first quarter of 2023. He's in training right now, but we're developing the employees within. We've had others that were managers of stores that worked for franchisees, and the franchisee recommended them to us as well. So that's some of the ways we've been able to get them in the past. And then just, LinkedIn and Indeed and recruiting for the position as well, just doing the same kind of stuff to try to get people.
In the beauty industry, especially cosmetology and estheticians, how are you feeling the turnover? And what strategies, especially your franchisees, make to retain people? And just one more question, is there any plan that you have with your franchisees to transform those hairstylists, cosmetologists into future franchisees?
Yeah, sure. So I guess, 2 different questions there, but, as a starting point, I think as the franchisor, first of all, we view our employment brand as every bit as important as our consumer brands, because ultimately it goes back to what I said before, that those service providers they are the product. They are spending 45 minutes to an hour with that customer and that experience with it. So the employment brand's a big part of what we do. We select franchisees based on how we think they're going to do on delivering the culture in the studios to begin with. Attrition's high, just in general out in the marketplace. It's funny, Jesse mentioned the different metrics on success. I don't need to look at sales. We track turnover in the studios by kind of racking and stacking, and if someone's got higher than about 70% turnover, then I know it's a train wreck, and if they're lower than 40%, I can almost guarantee you they're going to be in the top decile probably on the sales report. So that's what we track the closest. We don't have a lot of cosmetologists or massage therapists that are going directly into franchise ownership with us. We find, for the most part, like it's difficult for them to financially qualify. But secondly, the first step along the journey for entrepreneurship for them is often to go into a salon suites model or something else versus to really go engage on how to manage a 20-30 person operation. We in our Fitness Together brand, we have a little bit more of employee to owner, but it's a much simpler kind of 6-7 person thing. I think for the most part, the very things that excite people about going into esthetician and cosmetology make it challenging to go run a 7-figure four-wall operation on things. So we don't fish there for franchise prospects.
I saw a hand over here.
How are you baking in DEI initiatives into your processes and operations?
I'm happy to talk about it a little bit. It goes to our employment brand. So DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. For those of you who don't know what that is, and it's just how do you go about making sure you are recruiting and making the culture open for as broad of a group of people as possible. Our brands were mostly born with this. The massage therapy industry is a very diverse group. Estheticians and cosmetologists are certainly female-centric, but in terms of kind of race, backgrounds, LGBTQ, that type. We kind of embrace all of it, and it's a core value that we have. It goes back to selecting franchise owners. We make sure that they're gonna embrace that part of things. Frankly, it's a business imperative for the categories that we play in. It's an expectation of our consumers, and so it's an expectation for our employment brands as well.
Just one real quick question. So, I've heard that Chick-fil-A story from 15 years ago. They might have had 97 different logos within their store and different menus. So I've got brands in both the fitness and the medical wellness space, and next year we go to scale. So my question is this: everyone says, this is your box, you have to stay in it. I look at Chick-fil-A today, and we all keep that as a brand standard, right? Where they were all over the map. So my question to you guys is, as you're growing the franchise, at what point in time, you have to take a lot of info from your first franchisees, but at what point in time did you cut that off and say, okay, we've got enough, this is our brand now, this is our DNA, we can't really take a lot more of your suggestions without turning the franchisees off? So,
Ben, you want to take this one? We made eye contact.
Thank you. I should have looked that way. Well, for me, never, right? So we've learned a lot from our franchisees early on, but there definitely has to be that franchisor-franchisee level of respect and line of delineation, right? But always listening to the franchisees, getting their input, getting their feedback, picking up the phone, talking with them has always been extremely, extremely important to us.
So we're starting to run. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
You're going to definitely have a less engaged franchisee base if you stop making them feel like they're inclusive in the decisions. If I don't feel like I have some control over the brand, I'm out, right? And I'll sell it to some sucker that can't read a P&L well. What?
Yeah, well, they're entrepreneurs at heart. All of us are. And so they want that little bit of wiggle room, things like that. How did you guys define where that wiggle room kind of draws that line?
Well, I think, and between Charles and I, my brother and partner, we sat on every advisory board for all the brands at one time or another, right? And I'll be honest, some of them feel more like a rubber stamp than others, but one that felt like a rubber stamp really was not a rubber stamp during COVID, during the shutdown. They already had the mechanics in place, the apparatus to get that feedback from a select group of people to help steer the decision. So if you don't have an advisory committee, I definitely would have one. And they don't have to have power, they just need to have a word, right?
Just one quick thing on that. One, pick your battles. As someone who has acquired brands from founders over time, and they come into our system, right? And they're in various stages of either having had, in some cases, too strict of brand enforcement, in my view. Tri-Bar is an example of that. No one could have a social media page. No one could. They didn't have phones in the shops. They weren't allowed to talk to their guests directly. It was ludicrous. So we had to loosen up standards in those places. And other ones, it was just a total free-for-all. And I think a lot of it goes to talking to folks, explaining the why. It's like, look, we're a 50-unit chain. Do we want to be like Chick-fil-A someday, or do we want this to be we have to develop a brand. It has to be common across the country. We needed to do that with our lunchbox wax that we ultimately rebranded to Radiant Waxing. So, you look at that in through the lens of both where the franchisees are at, where the brand is at, and you're not going to be able to skip to the end of where you want to be overnight. It's going to be an evolution for everybody that's there. And I think as long as you have that North Star into the why you're trying to bring in the brand in a certain way and include the franchisees in the conversation, it's really not terribly difficult to get there as long as you keep the lines of communication open.
And one other thing, you can also set an expectation in transparency in your FDD. So setting an expectation that if you're going to, because with Drip Bar, we have franchisees coming in with crazy ideas. Every laser from Europe and here and there, and they want us to look at it, and it's a huge time suck on what we do. So we've set an expectation that if you're going to bring a value add opportunity, you're going to pay $500 for us to review it, and we're going to go through the full sequence. If it's something that we bring in, we'll reimburse it. And then on my calls, I always say, and if we don't accept it, The nurse that had to go through all the time gets that $500 for the tip. And it's really set a very good standard, because early on with Drip Bar, we were getting stuff all the time. Every vitamin, every needle, every vendor, everything across the board. But that's when you're emerging. Every franchisee thinks they're entrepreneurs, but they're franchisees. They're here because they want the system, they want the knowledge, they want the education. You have to set that expectation. $500 isn't very much, but it has definitely caused people to take a deep breath and not just send every new laser that's on Instagram to our nurses and saying, tell us everything that you know about it.
All right, so we're starting to run a little short on time, so we're going to end with a final, kind of more personal question, and it's for all of you. But what's one thing that you wish you did different 5 to 10 years ago? And whoever wants to go first, jump right in.
Boy, I could talk all right, so the other session is on development, right? So I'll share with you my experience, and it deals with development. And so you can go when you meet up with your counterparts and go, hey, here's what I learned. And you'll probably learn more than they're going to learn over there with this piece of advice. So real quick story, and I'll go really fast. So 2008, I'm a Valpak franchisee. I'm ripe old age of 30. They're having an owner's meeting, and they said the median age of the Valpak franchise owner is 65, and we don't have anyone succession plans. And they got really nervous, right? Now, why do they care? Because they don't want people randomly dying and then a whole area shut down because there's not a succession to it. So they do care, and they do have a prerogative about how you're structured tax-wise, but they never talk about how it's set up, right? And just to show of hands, how many of your brands require, or most of your franchisees have to take loans out to develop them? I do, right? I wish that a franchisor told me when I first started, how you set up your corporation will determine how much taxes you pay. So 5-10 years ago, well, between 5 and 10, we stumbled across a tax attorney and said, you know, if you guys are set up as an S Corp, like, yep, we're big guys. They're like, you know, if you are set up as an LLP or LP or LLC, because you're borrowing so much money, that goes against your personal basis. So if I take a $100,000 loan out, I've got to show the federal government I made $100,000 profit before I start making pay taxes on it. So my effective tax rate is my interest rate. So that's another 25-30% cash at the end of the year that I don't have to give the government that I can put towards another store. So our growth got exponential when we had to stop paying taxes. So I know you guys can't give them tax advice, but you can educate them, right? And there are different tax structures. And I've got friends that are way more successful than me that aren't set up like that. And they're cramming so much crap in their business trying to not pay taxes that when they get audited, they get slapped on the hand every time. This is a clean, legal way to not pay taxes. And so I'm building brick and mortars, so I get that rapid depreciation and I get that basis against the loan. So as long as I keep growing, I'm not paying taxes.
You mind just putting some more color on what you just said, S Corp versus LP or LLC?
Yeah, so, probably most of your franchisees form either an LLC or a C Corp and do a Series S, right? So with the LLC, if their accountant's paying attention, they can actually write the entire amount of the loan off against their basis. As an S Corp, the best I could do is the interest. Huge difference, right? Now, we're set up as an LP, a limited partnership. It's a little bit of an archaic thing, but there's no self-employment tax on that. The other piece of advice is if you've got a franchisee that's, let's say, my age, 45, they've already got their 40 quarters paid into Social Security, but I still see so many people pay themselves a W-2. Okay? Don't. Just do a draw. There's no self-employment tax. That's another 10% I save right there. And it's totally legal, but it's just how you skin the cat.
So from a franchisor's perspective of taxes, one thing that I wanted to learn a lot earlier is revenue recognition. It's a beautiful thing for all of you new emerging franchisors. So that's very important. But as far as what I would have liked to know 10 years ago, I would have loved to know about Springboard. 10 years ago, the first one was the only one that I've missed. I've been coming ever since. I started in franchising 9 years ago, And this is the one conference that I come to religiously, so I hope Lane hears that.
Is Lane in here?
Mine's a real simple one. I think almost to a concept I've been involved in. If you could go back in time 10 years, I would tell whomever's involved with building it, build the boxes 20% smaller for 20% less money every time. And if you think you're there, do it again. You can always build more. You can always get a second or third location. The number of failure points I've seen on a real estate strategy that is just overbuilding based on really optimism, essentially, of what it could be. 12-room studios when 8-room studios would do, $600,000 builds when you can get creative and get it to $450. Like, it really impacts the franchisee economics in the long run, and you can always make it bigger later. You're stuck with that real estate strategy forever. So smaller is better. It makes you more nimble. And if you find yourself as an emerging franchisor, you know, in the future you're going to be closing units. It's really painful to close a unit that's not profitable but is doing $900,000 of revenue because it was overbuilt and rent's too high. It's a way less painful to close smaller units as the franchisor, and you're more likely to find alternative franchisees that'll step into a fix-it job when the rent is low than when you're saddled with some $150,000 problem that's just not going to go away.
Can I follow up on the rent question quick? You guys have like a hard and fast top line rent that your model just doesn't work at that number per square foot?
Yeah, so yes, on a couple different ways. One, we've got our real estate committee, and I sit on it and I approve every single site. And if it's going to be over $85,000 on most of ours, like, they know they better have it. Like, it better be in Manhattan. Like, it's going to be a no. And occasionally we will approve something like that, but we will literally make the franchisee sign we understand we said this is a bad idea, which usually discourages them enough, and we'll go back to the drawing board and find something else.
Do you think of it in percentage of sales, or depending on the industry, right? $85,000.
It's going to be different. I said 85. It's going to be slightly different by brand, but there is definitely a ceiling, and it's almost always lower than what my real estate team likes it to be.
Marty, close this out.
So I guess there's a couple things, lots of things that we've done wrong. Most franchisors, especially emerging brands, are going to make lots of mistakes. Try to avoid the mistakes, right? That's the only advice I could give. Because you're just going to spend so much money on things that you really think you need. At the end of the day, you don't need it. You got to try to think about where are those landmines, where are you spending the money that you could avoid not spending, because again, we spent literally hundreds of thousands of dollars more than we needed to on certain things. But where we would have and should have done a better job is investing in technology a little earlier than we did, especially now, right? We got to really make sure we have a robust technology system to communicate with franchisees, to track all the data points, all those things. We should have done that earlier. And I would advise everybody to kind of jump on that wagon. And then goes back to sort of the culture piece. Did we bring in the right franchisees? Did we really explain our core values? Do we have, common interests with the franchisees? And you're going to make mistakes in the beginning with some of the early franchisees. And we make mistakes today. I mean, that just happens no matter what. But maybe we could have avoided some of those early days as well. But it's hard when somebody has a check and they want to buy your franchise. You're like, let's do it. But, you got to really make sure they're aligned with what you're going to do in the future together. It's a long relationship. So that would be it.
Any final questions from the audience? All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us. My personal takeaway from today was just you can't over-communicate enough. So thank you guys for all your information today.